Well, it's March the 10th, and we're moving right along in our year. Today, we're going to study Daniel chapter 2, and we'll start in verse number 1, and we're going to talk about the times of the toes. Some people refer to it as the times of the Gentiles, but if you look closely, it's really the times of the toes. And if you understand Daniel and Ezekiel, it'll open the doors to the book of Revelation. Because everything that Daniel's going to tell us is sometime in the future. So, anyway, but before we get into the lesson, I want to ask two questions. Because the main thing is the interpretation of the dream, but there's something that happens in the beginning that most people overlook, and it's kind of important from a biblical perspective. So the first question is it ever okay to lie?
No.
I think so.
I do too.
No.
There is somewhere in the Bible something about, but I can't tell you that verse.
My old preacher said it's never right to do wrong.
Well, that's what the Bible says. If you read the Ten Commandments, it's pretty clear. But people,
Sometimes you can have an argument about it with yourself.
yeah,
The
but
Spirit said no.
It's something about when somebody asks you a question that is personal, that I don't know where I got this, but I've gotten it in church somewhere when they ask you something personal.
Like, do you like the dress I've got on? Sure. Or are they going to say, no, it's terrible?
No,
You know?
but
If you're caught off guard like that, you don't know what to say.
Would you tell a lie?
that's right.
Would you tell a lie to save your mother's life?
Oh, don't ask that.
That's kind of the theory I have.
Yes, that's.
well, that's where the second question comes in. Is it okay to lie in the matter of life and death? Because this is what happens in the lesson today. Someone lies, they're faced with life and death, and they tell a lie.
Rahab lied. Didn't she?
So, some things to think about as we, go through life. There's, of course, the gentleman that lied was a Gentile. He was a Babylonian. He told a lie to the king. He lied to the king, and so forth. But
Kind
it's.
of like Fannie Willis, huh?
I'm not going to make any comments about that, but there's a lot could be said about that situation. So we'll not get into Georgia politics this morning. We'll kind of leave that one alone. But something to think about is, we are pressed for information and so forth. We need to, understand and follow the lead of our conscience. If we're a Christian, we need to follow our conscience, and because God gave us the conscience, and if we have the Holy Spirit is entwined with our conscience and will lead us to do the right thing. So, just some interesting information as into the insight into our lesson. We're in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 1. And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him, or left him. Now, Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were in Judah and were carried away captive to Babylon. Okay, this is about the year 605 BC. That's 605 years before the birth of Christ. Okay, so these 4 have been taken from Judah to Babylon, and they have been put in the king's court as wise men for the king. Okay, so this is the background of the story. It's about 600 years. Daniel and his 3 friends have been put in the court as wise men for the king. And at that time, they had lots of wise men and astrologers and those kinds of people because they wanted to know everything. They wanted to know the future and how to make decisions, and they use these wise men and astrologers to help them make decisions. And they thought that's where everything was. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar is about to find out who's really in charge. But for now, he's trusting in his wise men and these folks. And it's quite interesting where people put their trust. And it's interesting as we go through here, his sleep has left him. In verse 2, then the king gave the command to all the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. Notice that's plural dreams. So he's got his magicians and astrologers. Now, the Chaldeans were a group from the area of Chaldea that they were supposedly wise men as well. So he's got this group that he's asking for help. So they came and stood before the king. And at that time, if the king said, come, you went running. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. So he says, I've had a dream, and I'm anxious to know about this dream. It was really troubling. Then the Chaldean spoke to the king in Aramaic. So, beginning in chapter 2, verse 4, all the way through the end of chapter 7, it's all written in Aramaic. At this time, Aramaic was the language of the Babylonians. So, Daniel wrote the first part in Hebrew and is now writing, beginning in verse 4, in Aramaic. Now, there's 100 reasons people give for doing that. The most logical one is he wanted the Babylonians to understand the prophecy because it affected them. And the other people that are coming to be judged. Verse 4, then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. And of course, you've seen movies and they'll always walk in, O king, live forever and ever. we love you and kiss your feet and all that. Tell the servants the dream, and we will give you the interpretation. And that seems like you tell me what you dreamed, and we'll tell you what it means. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your house shall be made an ash heap. In other words, they're going to burn the house down.
I'd be more worried about that being cut in pieces. I would be about the house.
So it's serious now. I mean, not only does he want them to interpret the dream, he wants them to tell him what the dream was and then the interpretation. See, he's kind of like, it's like, okay, here we go, back and forth, back and forth. And he says, if I tell you the dream, then you'll make up some interpretation. He wants them, he's testing their powers. Basically, he says, you tell me what I dreamed and then interpret it for me. And they're like, don't know. But he's serious, because now he's going to cut them into pieces. And I don't want no guy with no sword chasing after me. Verse 6, however, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. Okay, so we're on, you're either going to get rewarded or you're going to get cut in pieces. Verse 7, then answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. Once again, they're telling you, tell us the dream. And he's already told them, tell me the dream and the interpretation. They're going back, we don't know the dream. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you give me its interpretation. He's saying, he doesn't know the dream, and he's going to make them tell the dream and the interpretation, because he's trying to figure out, do they know what they're doing? Have I got a bunch of loony bins out here running the show? For this reason, the king was angry and very furious, and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Now notice it said all. That includes Daniel and his friends, because they're part of the wise men. Okay, so now we're down to life and death. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Okay, so they're out, they're killing people now. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guards, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Verse 15, he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Why is this all of a sudden, they're pressing on him? And then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Arioch, tells Daniel. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. So notice, Daniel goes to Arioch, but watch what Arioch says to the king. It says, verse 17, then Daniel went to his house and made the decisions known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Arioch. That's what we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven. So they're going to pray concerning this secret. So Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of the God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he continues on with his prayers. Then in verse 24, notice, therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation. Verse 25. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king, and thus said to him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation. So right now, the lie has come out. He said, I went and found this guy, king, that can tell you the interpretation thereof. No. Daniel went to Arioch. But Arioch decided, he's king's out killing people. Maybe I need to put a few feathers in my hat. So he tells
Some points.
he wants some points.
Yeah.
It's important. I got to have some points for this.
Isn't that what you call taking advantage of a situation?
Yes, that's exactly right, Gary. Taking advantage of the situation at hand. And I'm going to get some feathers in my hat because these people out here dying over this situation. So, and that's, you have to weigh the pros and cons. But anyway, what actually happened, Daniel went to Arioch, but Arioch tells the king he's been out scouring the countryside looking for these guys, and I found somebody. So it's interesting how things evolve when it's a life and death situation. I mean, it's serious. Verse 27, Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. So Daniel's going to tell him right up front what's going on. And all these people, the soothsayers were ones that dabbled in what we call the occult, witchcraft kind of things. Making potions and spells and stuff like that. Verse 28, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Now, if you remember from last week, when we use the term latter days, we're talking about the 7-year tribulation period. It's during the the reign of the Antichrist. Now, people want to say, well, why didn't Daniel use better terminology? Daniel didn't understand everything that he was writing. He just knew it was a time in the future. So he uses what he's led by the Holy Spirit to write, because all this is foreign to me. I mean, this is 600 years before Christ. Daniel and Ezekiel and Joel and Zechariah, they're still waiting for the Messiah to come. I mean, this is 600 years before Jesus is born. They're still waiting for the Messiah to come, much less what's going to happen, 2,000 years later. So, Daniel's doing the best he can, and we have to kind of interpolate. And, but he tells us in the latter days. So he knows it's sometime in the future. But he tells them, that, his soothsayers can't do anything, but God can. And skip down to verse 30. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living. Daniel immediately lets the king know, I'm not that smart. It's not about me. Okay? He's showing, because I have more wisdom than anyone else. But for our sakes, who may know the interpretation to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. Verse 31, you, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. So we got this huge statue that appears, and it's very awesome, and uses the phrase splendor was excellent. In other words, it's so majestic and just so awesome because it's huge. And as we look at the different pieces of it, you can understand, bright, shiny gold, the silver, sparkling. So it says, this image head was of fine gold. Now, fine gold means 24 karat gold. Basically is what they're saying. This is pure gold. And if you ladies particularly love that 24 karat gold look, I've learned that in my 47 years.
And I learned it took the green look to get it.
So, anyway, this image head was of fine gold. Its chest and arms of silver. So now we got a solid gold head. We got arms, and the chest are made out of silver. Its belly and thighs of bronze. Okay. Its legs of iron. Okay. So we can see we're building an image of what appears to be a warrior. Okay, so we got a head of gold, we got arms, now we got legs. Its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So now we get down to the feet and toes, and it's a mixture of clay and iron. Now, if you know anything about, you've heard this, water and oil don't mix. Well, iron and clay don't mix either.
So that big statue didn't have much to stand on.
You're getting there, David. Thank you. Now, $10 later. But yeah, we got our feet are, how we walk around, stand up. It's your feet's kind of important. I mean, mine are. I don't know. Maybe somebody else.
Supports the rest of the structure.
Huh?
Supports the rest of the structure.
That's right. If you want to get from that chair to your car, you're either gonna have to ride in a wheelchair or walk.
Good foundation is the best place to start.
That's right. So we're beginning to look here, and it says, verse 34, you watched while a stone was cut without hands. Now, has anyone ever busted up a rock with a hammer? Maybe when you were little or something, but you had to do something to break up the rock and shape it into whatever thing. I have gone mining and found amethyst up in North Georgia, and I have whittled away at it very carefully and have got some pieces. So I kind of understand, but it takes hands to mold something. You can't just. But notice it says it's cut without hands. So we have a rock that's cut without hands. It's just done. And notice what happens. Which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. It goes back to the foundation. And he's going to crush the feet and toes. Which is what's going to happen next?
It's going to topple.
Right, the statue's going to topple over. Oh my. Verse 35, then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. The wind carried them away so that there was no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Now, this, is beginning to look rather interesting. I mean, we've got this giant statue, and now this stone comes up, crushes the feet, and then the whole statue's crushed up, and now the stone grows into a mountain. That's interesting. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a King of Kings. Notice the a King of Kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hands, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. So he tells Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom is the head of gold. And at this point in time, the Babylonian Empire was the greatest empire on the earth. They had conquered everything else, and even the nation of Israel, because of their disobedience. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours. Now notice the word inferior. We're talking about something totally different. Something totally strange. Then another, a kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like the iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. So that goes into quite a bit of detail about the iron kingdom. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, but just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Because iron and clay don't mix. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, in these days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. So it shall break in pieces and consume all kingdoms, and shall stand forever. So he tells us what's going on, where he's at, and then and in verse 46, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Then the king answered Daniel and said, truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. Wow. And God, when Daniel prayed, God answered, and God answered Daniel's prayer, and he got promoted. So we know that head of the statue. The next kingdom would be the Medo-Persian Empire. And they would come and they would reign for a period of time. Then we know the kingdom of brass was Greece. We know, we've read in our world history, if we can still remember that far, Alexander the Great and how he went through and conquered all the lands. And Greece was a great nation for many, many years. Of course, when Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided and it kind of went hither and thither and so forth. And then the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, and that's the Roman Empire. And we've all studied in our world history about the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. And that's, you know, at the time of Christ, Rome was in control of that part of the world. And they were the empire. So we see, the Roman Empire has continued for many, many years and so forth. And then the divided kingdom. And we've got the 10 toes. And if you go back to your high school world history class and study the rise and fall of you can figure out some things. In 476 AD, which is about, 476 years after the birth of Christ, the last Roman emperor was forced to abdicate the throne after several years of attacks on Roman territories by scattered tribes. And the tribes would, eventually take over the Roman Empire. Now, my pronunciation is not the best in the world, so I'm going to try. A tribe of Franks came in, and that is now the nation of France that we know today. The Alemannians tribe is now what we call Germany. The Lombards are now what we call Italy. The Sueles is now Portugal. Anglo-Saxons, you got to guess what country that is? England. That's right. Anglo-Saxon became England. The Burgundians, anybody know what that is? Switzerland. And the Visigoths is what we know as modern day France. So we can see what's going on here is Daniel is looking into the future and he's saying these 10 toes, are going to be out there, these 10 countries, and during the tribulation period, Christ, or God through Jesus, is going to crush them because Jesus is going to be the stone that crushes them, and his kingdom, which is the millennial kingdom, is going to be the mountain. So, as we today standing here looking, now please remember, there's a several events in parallel. In other words, this is one of event that's going to happen in the future. But there's several others as we go through Daniel chapter 7 next week. You'll see more and more. But, you know, what we know today is the European Union, which is, you know, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, you know, Spain, Switzerland, those countries over there. They've sort of got their little thing here. But God's going to judge those folks. And he's going to crush them. So today, we need to watch the news because that's Bible prophecy over there. And when things are not going well over there, we can begin to see the prophecy that Daniel told here in chapter 2 coming to head. It's a little sneak peek of what is coming during the tribulation period. And I think, you know, he's going to start judging those countries quite quickly. I'm currently reading a book by a gentleman who called the 22 Reasons I Believe the End is Near. And it's very interesting. And he talks about all the different things, but one of the things he mentions in the book is the European Union and the internal strife they're having there.
What's amazing too is how much the Muslims have infiltrated those countries.
Yes.
And their influence is starting to show.
Yes, it is. So as we sit here today, just remember 600 years before the birth of Christ, Daniel was given a vision to interpret this dream, and that interpretation is still in process because God has not set up the kingdom yet, but rest assured he will. And so one day, you know, those 10 countries are going to be gone. And notice the one thing he says is they're going to be blown away like the chaff, you know, after grain, you know, and you blow all the dust off, there's nothing going to be left. I mean, that's, to me, is total destruction. So as you listen to the headlines, pay attention to a lot of us came from, I know my family came from England. And so, you know, our parent countries are under judgment. And we need to be aware and keep an eye out, because as that goes, then we know how close the rapture is. So.
But Nebuchadnezzar was a slow learner.
Yes.
He has all of this, and he has this horrible dream and all these things that are going to happen. In the very next chapter, he does it all over again and tells all of them to pray to him, throws Meshach
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
in the fire. I mean, and then he says, "Oh, your God is God," you know. So
He
something's wrong with his brain.
and I agree with you 100% because he repeatedly
Yeah,
goes.
do it again.
What's the word? Fickle. Because, you know, here he's just promoted Daniel and giving him a bunch of presents. And then, and I don't want to sneak into next week's lesson, but, you know, he's not he's not doing right. And I don't, what does it take to finally learn? How hard-headed can you be? And
Well, I'm still there, so I can't answer that one.
but he just doesn't grasp it. And that's the reason his kingdom is not here today, is he didn't. And we're under the times of the toes. We're waiting for God's judgment on those 10 nations.
That's an interesting study. When they did bring Daniel and those people into their country, apparently even his fickle mind realized that that's a smart man, they're wise men. Unless they were smart enough to stand up for themselves, they probably were learned and could do write and stuff. But you say, well, I'm going to use these guys. That's the only thing that amazes me. He didn't learn anything.
Yeah. I mean, they recognized that these 4 Jews were special. And here they proved, here in chapter 2, they proved how special they were. But yeah, you turn a few more pages and he's back off the rocker, and he's gonna, Daniel's been promoted. Well, how many of you have heard the story of Daniel in the lion's den?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's here in chapter 2, he's been promoted, yet here in a few more chapters, he's going to get thrown in the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to get thrown in the fiery furnace. So, but anyway, but we're waiting for these countries and God's judgment on them. And when Christ comes and sets up the millennial kingdom, that'll be the giant mountain that we're talking about here, is the millennial kingdom of Christ and so forth. So anyway, we're getting a glimpse now what's going to happen in the tribulation period. One of the things that's happening is going to crush these 10 nations. So when you get in the book of Revelation, starting in chapter 5, and start looking at the first part of the tribulation, then you can see the judgments and how Daniel predicted all of this, 600 years before. It's amazing. So, anybody got any other questions? Okay, we'll be looking at Daniel chapter 7 next week, and we'll go through some more prophecies. Then we'll look at Daniel, I think it's 11, then Matthew 24 and 25, and so forth. So, got lots of interesting things and prophecies that we're still waiting to be fulfilled. So, anyway, anybody got any other questions or comments? Okay, any update?
10 nations.
Huh?
You said there's 10 nations as part of the European Union?
Yeah. Yeah, if you look
A couple
up,
weeks ago, we were talking about the United States, and it was possible the United States will fall and we become part of the European Union. So then that means we're going to be part of that, correct?
well, the people believe that America will fall, and I have to agree because America's nowhere in there. And I think America will be, because most of our ancestors came from the European Union, we will come subservient to the European Union. But I don't think we'll be part of it. We could be. I don't know who
If we're still there.
Well, in what capacity we're still here. But that, that's a good observation, Michelle, because we don't know. Just like in South America, Brazil is a huge country, but they're not mentioned in prophecy either.
Right.
There's huge blocks of people that are not mentioned, and where are what does happen to those folks, and nobody knows.
You think this immigration that we've seen this year, well, a lot of years, but especially in the last year or two, the numbers that have come into the U.S.,
Yes.
China is sending, they've actually built a road in Central America. They built a highway for the Chinese to fly from China to Venezuela, from Venezuela, walk. But they built a highway on a very treacherous part of that journey. So they're coming all the way from China, and China's actually invested in a highway so their people can walk. It was very treacherous, like if you misstep, you'd fall off a cliff. And so they paved a road for them to get through that part of the trek and then come on in, through the South American countries and Mexico, and they're home. They're back over here. So that's a lot of, with everything else that's going on in America, I think they're very smart people. Of all of them coming in, I think they're the smartest. And I think they're being placed here on purpose.
Oh, yes. And if you notice, there's more of those balloons flying around. There's another balloon floating up in Wyoming again.
So it may be that.
So,
it's by China. Could be.
we
Who knows?
prophecies happening, and there's little clues, and this today is another clue as to what's going on, and what to be watching for.
But I don't think that many people could be leaving China and China building a road from Venezuela. It's not from Venezuela, but it's part of the trail that they have to make to see that they arrive safely. I don't think they would invest so diligently to get them here. They want them here.
Oh yeah, they need spies. So yeah, it's the way of the future, and so forth. Okay, any updates on our prayer list? How is your son-in-law?
Brian?
Yes.
He had his last radiation treatment Friday, so he's done with that. He had his 20 treatments, and just gonna wait and see if it's helped any at all.
He got to ring a bell because he finished his
Radiation.
radiation.
Okay, very good.
They're gonna give it a little time to see what it does, then go do a CAT scan and see, or MRI, I think, and then see if it's helped it. So just praying for him.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad he's getting better, and I know it's hard on his family and Robert and them when he's got the treatments and not feeling chipper and all that.
Yep.
That's good. That's good. How is Walter today, Beverly?
He's sleeping.
That's good.
Yeah. We spent some time outside yesterday, and it wore him out. I mean, he just went out where I could get in the cold air. It wasn't cold, but
Yeah.
it was cool.
Felt good, I'm sure.
He did spend some time out yesterday, which is the first time he's done that in
Couple weeks.
It's been almost a month since he went out anywhere, other than the doctor's office. We go
Right.
there often.
Yeah, I understand that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how is James Lane today?
I'm okay. Billy's got a story she'd like to tell you about Thursday's appointment, so
Oh, okay.
be excited.
Let's hear it, Billy.
Okay, he had his last treatment yesterday. But Thursday, we were supposed to be there at 11:30. Wednesday, we get a call, Thursday morning, we got the call. Can you come at 2:00? Okay, so we were already on our way for the 11:30 appointment because we have to go to Noonan because of they have the compression
We
chamber.
made it to Woolsey Baptist Church.
Yeah, then we turned around there and came back. So we go home, eat a sandwich, and we head out again to be there by 2:00. We got a little farther that time, close to Noonan. We get another call. It's not gonna be ready today, can you come tomorrow? So that was interesting. We have sightseed all around that area, but anyway.
You saw all the Whitewater, didn't you?
We finished them up Friday.
Yes, Friday was the last one. He got to ring the bell. And in 4 weeks, he has to have the CT scan
Mm-hmm.
to see if it's working. So far, the only side effects, he's just been really tired and he's sore on his right side, which so far that's good.
So he hasn't been out doing yard work.
No, he's been playing with the chickens though.
Oh, okay.